Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. Not in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you. I know that life outside is so hard. There's a lot of things that can tear you apart. Sometimes feel lonely, but remember you're not the one and only. There's always someone there to help you, a helping hand to pull you through. Only one thing you should do: take my hand and join the love and life crew. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, let it love and life guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And yeah, we have a cracker for you tonight. I mean, really, who wants to listen to hippo eyes, after all? Tonight we've got Dirk Hermann, the CEO of Solidarity, and what an amazing man he is. Okay, let's give you a bit of background before I get Dirk on. There are two organizations with membership of well over 100,000 in South Africa that are a thorn in the back of the ANC's corruption and incompetence. They are AfriForum and Solidarity. Tonight we're talking to Dirk Hermann, the CEO of Solidarity, and we'll be looking at the past, the present and the future of this amazing union movement that is a breath of fresh air. Solidarity was founded in June 1902, just days after the end of the Boer War. In the past, Solidarity has fallen foul of DSTV censorship. Let's hear something from Dirk Hermann about this particular issue. Let me just get that up.
Die vakbond Solidariteit is onlangs in kennis gestel dat DSTV nie ons advertensie wil uitsaai nie. Dit is die tweede keer hierdie jaar wat dit gebeur. Nou, wat is so omstrede aan hierdie advertensie dat DStv nie wil hê jy moet dit sien nie? Ons weet nie. DStv gee ook nie goeie redes nie. Daarom het ons besluit om hierdie advertensie op die sosiale media bekend te stel, sodat jy self kan besluit. Is dit billik? Hier is ons advertensie.
Daar is net een organisasie wat veg vir jou reg om te werk. Net een wat 'n helpende hand gee wanneer politieke magspeletjies en afleggings jou sak raak. Net een wat jou en jou kinders se loopbaandrome deur opleiding help verwesenlik. Solidariteit in goeie en slegte tye. Sluit vandag aan by Solidariteit. Ons is aan jou kant. SMS die woord lid na 34802 en ons bel jou. Dit is lid na 34802.
Okay, Solidarity has been very active in challenging the ANC government over its decision-making or lack of decision-making. I mean, really, they're completely clueless, aren't they? Let's listen to Dirk Hermann talk about South African Airways in January this year, before it was put into business rescue.
The fact is, if you look at the financial situation of SAA, it is in a dire straits. The fact of the matter is something must be done. And the removal proceedings will do nothing to save the SAA. The fact is that the state lost its ability to save this specific airline. There must be a third-party intervention. We are afraid we are maybe too late. The fact of the matter is that we can't save the SAA in its current state, and therefore we need a third-party intervention, and we believe that the business rescue application is the best way to get a kind of a solution for the SAA. The cost for jobs and for South Africa in its whole, if there's a total collapse, that's too expensive. We need a controlled emergency landing for the SAA.
Okay, you can see that Solidarity are right on the mark when they talked about South African Airways needing a business rescue. Days after that appeal by Dirk Hermann, guess what happened? That's exactly what they did. Now, Solidarity is currently challenging the government over its race-based funding of people impacted by the lockdown in the tourism industry, and that's one of the issues we're going to be talking tonight. And that's far more important, believe me, than Hippo Eyes and his little burblings that will apparently coming on in about 20 minutes. Alright, let's get Dirk on and we'll get the party started. Here we go, guys. Hi, Dirk.
Hi, Scott.
How are you?
Fine, and you?
Great, thank you. We got about 250 people watching at this early stage, which is great. I can't see you. I can just see your little icon. Have you got the cam on?
Oh, you can't see me. Let me just check. Still not.
No, I just see the little DH.
Okay, just a moment.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Still not.
No. Let me just call you back and just see if that fixes it.
Okay.
Okay, I can still just see the icon at the moment, Dirk.
Oh, Scott. Okay, let me just check then. That's funny. Just want to close everything here.
That's okay. While you're doing that, I'll just mention that we've just been having a bit of a sort of a intro on Solidarity and the work that you're doing and covering what we're going to be discussing tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd still just see the little icon.
Yes. Well, that's funny. Why will that be?
Worked fine this morning, didn't it?
Yes, everything was fine this morning. It's the first time that it happens with me, Leston.
Yeah.
Aha, I think I've got the problem.
Okay.
But still not. Can you see me now?
Nope. I can just see the little icon.
We do not connect to your cellular since
Well,
it may be in use for another application only.
yeah. How about we get started while you fiddle around there? Because first of all, what I'd like to ask you is a little bit about your background. Tell the viewers about your growing up in two different worlds in South Africa, pre and post 1994.
Yes, I grew up in the Free State, in the farming community.
Right.
The town that I grew up was in Heilbron. And my dad worked at the dairy company at Clover SA. And so my life was literally within the farming community. Now, the fact of the matter is most Afrikaners has some kind of link with the farming community. So that is where I grew up. So I'm quite in touch with the soil of South Africa.
Right.
And of course, it's also a place where one got connected with farmers. And all my friends' dads were farmers. My dad worked at the dairy company. And there also we got involved with people that's now attacked on farms and farmers that's killed. My own dad brother was killed on a farm, murdered on a farm. And so that was quite dramatic for us as a family as well. My nephew, my wife's nephew, got murdered on a farm as well. And her uncle was murdered. A friend of mine was set alight on the farm by a farm attack. So we really experienced the whole issue of farm attacks in South Africa quite intensely because the place where I grew up. And but from there I went to the Potchefstroom University and I studied there first law and later on industrial sociology. And then I started to work at the Old Mine Workers Union. The Old Mine Workers Union then later changed its name to Solidarity, and that is where I work now.
Right. How long have you been with Solidarity now?
Well, I'm there now for 22 years, so it's quite a long time.
Right. Now, tell us the history of Solidarity, because it was established just after the Boer War in 1902, wasn't it? And tell us tell us some of its history and its key moments in South African history.
Yes, we have quite a long history in South Africa, established in 1902, just after the Boer War. Now, that's quite important to understand because it was a dramatic time in the South African history. Of course, it was a time when people tried to stand up after the war. The whole issue of the concentration camps in the war had to be overcome. And the scorched earth policy in the war led to a real after-war depression. And then a lot of especially the young boys had to go from farms to the mining community. And then they started to work on the mines, and the trade union was then formed. And so we are a direct result of the Anglo-Boer War, and we were part of the history of people that after the war actually stood up and tried to establish a new future. And they made a deliberate decision to stand up via the community, not necessarily through the empire.
Right.
And that was quite difficult. And they established women organizations, and they established youth organizations and schools, etc. And their quite interesting history of Afrikaners actually started, where they said that we want to survive through the community. And after that, of course, there was the after the First World War, and in South Africa there was a rebellion. And after that, there was in Afrikaans, it's called the Help Mekaar movement, or the Help Each Other movement. And the trade union, of course, were involved in that as well. And that was a movement where the community actually said that let's try to help each other after the war and the rebellion to stand up. And that was again an initiative from the community itself. And so the DNA of Solidarity is definitely community, where we through years used the community actually to stood up, especially in difficult times, also with difficult relations with government. And today it's again so. We sit in South Africa with a lot of challenges if it comes to government. And we sit in a situation where the government the state gets weaker, but the government actually gets stronger. They centralize more and more. And it's a dangerous position if you have a weak state, but a strong government, especially for minorities.
Right.
And Solidarity then organizes itself around the idea that minorities must take self-responsibility within South Africa to try to see how one can make sure that you can survive in South Africa as a minority community within a majority environment.
Right. Now, have you seen that 1993 document penned by Ramaphosa, where he talks about the boiling frog syndrome?
Yes, I'm quite aware of that, yes.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that? Do you think this is a deliberate strategy that they're pulling out?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's so deliberate. They're quite honest on their strategies and policies. What we always say is just believe them. Our government is quite an honest government. They say that we will expropriate land without compensation, and then everyone is saying no, they will not do that at all. It will kill the economy. But they are honest about that. So they actually are saying what they are doing. And the problem in South Africa is just that we don't believe them. And if they say that we will transform South Africa according to racial lines, well, they actually are doing that. So they do what they say, and one can believe the government for what they are saying. And so yes, I understand the whole notion of the frog and in the boiling water, but the fact of the matter is they were from the beginning quite serious about their ideology and the way that they foresee for South Africa.
Don't you think then that the white community, who basically handed over power in 1994, were misled? Because, you know, there was all this talk about the Rainbow Nation and everybody working together, and clearly that is not what the ANC are about.
The fact is that we sit in a situation where there was a lot of promises made after 1994, and people were also a bit naive on that. They actually believed that we will just change a liberal democracy dominated by Afrikaners for just a liberal English democracy. And that is actually not what happened. We actually have a quite liberal constitution, but we don't have a liberal government. And the constitution and the government is actually in tension with each other.
Right. And
that makes it difficult because we, on the one hand, we have all the liberal idiom in South Africa, and it sounds good, and it sounds well, and we have a modern constitution. But the problem is the government itself is a centralized government that have strong socialist ties. There's an alliance with the South African Communist Party, and they are not in nature liberal, and that we see more and more. The fact of the matter is that if you look at change, the short-term in effect of change is quite regularly overestimated. So you think that, oh, look, there was change and the effect was not that big. But the long-term effect of the change is quite often underestimated. And that is what we experience at this stage in South Africa, is the long-term effects of change and what it is actually doing to South Africa now.
Right. Now, just talking about change, right now we've got the lockdown happening, and I think Ramaphosa is going to be talking in about 20 minutes or something like that, but I think we've got far more important stuff to talk about than his babblings. With this expropriation of land without compensation, that is an absolute disaster when it comes to the economy, when you consider the damage that's going to happen with the lockdown. And foreign investment is going to completely dry up because of the uncertainty of this EWC. What are your thoughts about that?
Any attack on property rights will chase away any investors, and that's the problem that we sit with in South Africa. That before the COVID-19 crisis, we had real economic problems. And now, of course, we sit in a crisis like the rest of the world, but our foundation is quite weak. And now, so what we need now is a very quite sound economic policy. And at the moment that you attack property rights, then it means that you will not get any investors. So it's a quite dangerous situation. It seems that the ANC wants to push through with that. But if there's one thing that we now must avoid is any policy uncertainty, especially if it comes with property rights. So any attack on that have tremendous consequences, especially in the situation that we are at this stage.
Right. Now, I'm just going to address the side chat for a moment. Guys, if you've got any questions you'd like to put to Dirk Hermann, please just put them in the side chat and the moderators will copy them, and when we're ready, we'll pose them to Dirk. And Dirk, do you just want to try your camera again, see if we can get that happening? And
let me try that again.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, at the moment we've got, let's see, we've got 350 people watching, so we've got quite a nice crowd here.
Yes, I will just try this camera again because it worked quite well during the day.
Right, guys, we're just trying to get Dirk's camera going. Sorry,
yes,
Dirk?
while I'm trying, we can continue.
Yeah, okay. Well, what I wanted to ask you next was, we call it black privilege on this channel. Black privilege is basically the huge divide between the rich and the poor in the black community. And what we see happening is that through the race-based policies like black economic empowerment and broad-based black economic empowerment, the only people who've actually enriched themselves are the ANC politicians, their cadres, their families, their friends. It's like an elite little class. We call it black privilege. And the rest of the black population, if anything, has gone into a bigger hole of poverty. What are your thoughts about this word black privilege sort of defining that group of people?
We sit in a situation in South Africa where quite a paradox developed. And the paradox lies in that is that the elite group got enriched through black economic empowerment. But the fact is, because of that, there was a brain drain in South Africa, people that left the country, left to Australia and the rest of the world. And of course, there was also a loss of institutional memory. Let's take, for instance, and I will come back to the paradox right now, but let's take, for instance, Eskom, our electricity supplier. We sit with a crisis in South Africa with blackouts, the electricity supplier that's in the process of imploding, that can create huge crises in South Africa. We don't have proper electricity supply, energy supply in South Africa. That's to the detriment of economic growth. But the fact of the matter is, Eskom got rid in 2002 of around about 10,000 white employees. And they created what they call space creation packages. Now, that was packages where they offer the white employees severance packages so that they can leave the company to create space for black employees. Now, the problem with that is that all the institutional memory was lost in Eskom. And that created a real crisis. So the fact is the electricity crisis in South Africa, the dark picture that we have with electricity in South Africa has everything to do with transformation in South Africa that was done in a hastily and in an absolute irresponsible manner. And here's the paradox: the people that pay the price for weak economic growth in South Africa is actually those that is supposed to be helped by transformational policies. But you sit with a small elite and the huge mass in South Africa that gets to the detriment affected by these policies. The fact is that if you look at the healthcare system in South Africa, that actually already imploded, especially the public healthcare system. We have a world-class private healthcare system. The public healthcare system actually imploded in South Africa. Now, that surprises at this stage, but the majority of the people that got, of course, negatively affected are the poor South Africans, and the majority of them are poor black South Africans. So they pay actually the price of the transformation processes in the public service because of an ideology of transformation. And that's the paradox in South Africa. So, and that we sit with in more than one way in South Africa. And that's something that must be addressed. But the problem at this stage is the more we continue with the democracy in South Africa, the more aggressively the government gets with it if it comes to race-based policies. And that's a headache at this stage in South Africa. It's absolutely absurd. The kind of policies that they introduce. One of the most recent examples are we are in a lockdown. We sit like in Australia, we sit, and the rest of the world, America, etc. We sit with the crisis of COVID-19, and because of regulations that was promulgated by government, small businesses are in a crisis. They can't do business. And the government then said that we will come with aid programs to support the specific companies. This crisis was because of government's regulations, and now the Department of Tourism in South Africa, that's of course the sector that was the hardest hit. They said that aid will be given on a race base.
Right.
So we sit in a situation where people sit with real problems, and their employees, including of course black employees, sit there, and then government say that, listen, we will determine not by by the crisis of your business whether you will get help or not. We will determine it on the color of your skin. Now that's absurd. There's simply no sense. It's not apartheid. The COVID-19 is not the fault of apartheid at all. But everyone's paying the price here.
They blame just about everything on Jan van Riebeeck, don't they?
They do, yes. That is this funny thing that Jan van Riebeeck is blamed for everything, and Jan van Riebeeck was here in 1652, and that we sit in a situation in South Africa where we think I've come from the psychological environment, and so we sit here with the external locus of control where they don't take self-responsibility. Everything is blamed on each other, on something else, and that is a dilemma.
Right. Now, just going back into recent areas that Solidarity have been involved in. Back in January this year, you touched on South African Airways. You called for a business rescue for South African Airways before they actually went into business rescue. Now, just looking at what took South African Airways to that, it's I always call it the canary in the mine, because it reflects what happens when you have BEE coming around and determining who's going to be in charge of the organization by way of the board. who gets into management positions in South African Airways, and then you have the same old corruption and incompetency happening. Don't you see that same thing happening right through the ANC government at all levels?
Yes, we have a problem with that in South Africa, is that we sit in a situation, what I said in the beginning, that the state gets weaker and weaker. And while the state is getting weaker and weaker, the government gets stronger and stronger, mean that they want to govern more and more from a centralized base. Now, that has tremendous implications if you govern, but you govern from a weak position and you want to govern more and more. Then it happens that your state institutions also get weaker and weaker, but the fact is they want to control more and more. For instance, if you take the healthcare system in South Africa, the public healthcare system is quite weak at this stage in South Africa, but now they want to implement a healthcare system where the state control all, including the private sector. So they managed the public sector to the ground, and now they say we want to do that with the private sector as well. So they centralize actually more. The correct policy would actually be to decentralize more, so that you can get more in the hands of the community and the private sector, so that you can actually, through that, support a weak state. But they do exactly the opposite. Also with the South African Airways, that is government funded airways, government-owned airways. And our business rescue application was the first in the history of South Africa where a civil organization or any organization tried to put the a government institution in business rescue. So we continue with that. We had to be in court on the Friday, and then the Wednesday the government applied for their own business rescue of the SAA, and then from then on they tried to control the process. So the fact is they brought that business rescue application for one reason, and that is because they want to control the process. And we see it up to today, that they want to try that, control that whole business rescue application. Right. So we sit as in a situation in South Africa where the government control more and more, and that put us all, of course, in a very, very difficult situation.
Right. Now, there was, of course, that complete denial that funding was going to be race-based when it was exposed initially. Remember that?
Yeah. You are referring now to during the COVID-19 crisis.
Yes.
Yes, that was quite correctly. They said it was fake news. So they denied it. So what we've done then is we went to court. And in the first place, we started with an application so that we can get access to information, so that we can get clarity on the whole issue of race-based help during the COVID-19 crisis. And then the Department of Tourism, in their papers, acknowledge that they will help they're going to help on base of race. So that is now under oath. So that is fixed on the 28th of April that this specific case will then be heard.
Now, what are the outcomes you're looking for in this action?
Well, we hope that the court will review that specific decision of the department. The fact is that we don't believe that can be rational in a state of emergency that we are at this stage, and so we of a state of disaster like we are in this case.
Right.
So we hope that decision will be reviewed, because the fact of the matter is we can't see that can be rational at all. But the fact of the matter is still that is just a tactical battle that we fight. We fight the big race-based democracy in South Africa. Previous sitting where South Africa made an presentation to the Committee for the Eradication of All Forms of Racial Discrimination at the United Nations, Solidarity also made a presentation to the committee, and the committee indicated that South Africa must report back on why they still use apartheid race-based classifications. And so South Africa must now go back to the UN to say why they still do that. Because the fact of the matter is, we are still in South Africa, in oral actions, we are race-based. Solidarity as a case against Sasol, the petrochemical giant in South Africa. That case will be heard in December this year. Our members also went on strike at Sasol for the simple reason they had an employee share ownership scheme. And this share ownership scheme read that only black employees can get shares in Sasol. So that means that a young black guy that come in to Sasol and he worked there for 3 days,
Right.
will get shares worth of 500 million rand, and the white guy that worked there for 30 years will get simply nothing. And the reason is the color of the skin, their skin. So they will work there together, and they do that side by side, artisan and artisan, and then one guy will get shares and the other no shares, simply because of the color of their skin. Now, they are so absurd that if you you are a black employee, and we have a case like that, a black employee married to a white employee, then your kids can't get that shares. They can't inherit the shares because they are not black enough. Then after that's according to the rules of the share.
That is crazy.
But that is what happens if you have a hard race classification ideology. Then it happens that it becomes absurd. And that is what's happening at this stage in South Africa. It's absurd. We had early, in the middle of last year, South Africa announced, President Ramaphosa, this initiative where they say that young unemployed youth in South Africa will be helped. And then if you apply and you want to fill in that because you must fill in your race. If you fill in and you click white, then that specific system kick you off. Then you can't go into the next level because you are a white unemployed youth. We started with a court action against that, and then on the steps of the court, they made a settlement and they changed that. But the fact of the matter is we first had to go to court, because the fact is it's not true that all whites in South Africa are rich and all blacks in South Africa are poor. It's not so anymore. The black middle class is much, much bigger at this stage than all whites in South Africa together.
Right.
And so the fact is that we sit here in South Africa with real poor whites, and they and suddenly they are discriminated against simply because of the color of their skin. And that is the absurdity of a race-based ideology. Lastly, in the Western Cape, the coloured employee, the coloureds are in the majority, but the government decided that what must be implemented in the Western Cape is the national racial democracy. So then they said that if appointments are made, then it must be made according to the national racial democracy. And that means that coloureds can't be promoted in the Western Cape at all because they are the majority. So they must be managed down from around about 53% to 4-5% in the Western Cape. We also went to the court there, to the Constitutional Court of South Africa, and that case we've won. And that's the absurdity of that. It's a racial, it's a hard racial ideology that leads to irrational outcomes.
Right. Now, Solidarity, I mean, it does amazing work. I think your intervention in certain areas when it comes to what you see is just absolutely wrong is commendable, because there are so few organizations in South Africa that can actually challenge the government in some of the things they do. And I just want to say that it's really disturbing when you look at how the mainstream media in South Africa misreport things and seem to have their own narrative when it comes to reporting. How have you found that kind of reporting impacting on your getting your message out to South Africans?
It's quite difficult because there's a narrative, a broad narrative in South Africa that is established by government. The fact of the matter is the government ideology, but I think it's almost everywhere in the world, that the governing parties, especially if you have such a strong government than in South Africa, that becomes the broad national consensus. And anyone that's not in line with that is seen as actually unpatriotic. And the mainstream media, in most cases, not in all cases, but in most cases, follow that just the narrative of the governing party. They just follow what they say. We had now a specific case. Solidarity started with a crisis fund in the COVID-19 crisis, and people donated, and one specific company donated to us X amount.
Yeah.
And then a big company in South Africa, and then they just sent us a letter, which you must just sign this following contract. If we help poor people, then it must be 100% black. The fact of the matter is that we sit here in a crisis where all in South Africa suffers, and now a company comes here and prescribes that the only group that we can help is black. So we wrote back to them and say, well, then we don't want your money. We can't prescribe to help people simply on the basis of their skin. So that was simply not acceptable for us. But the problem is the broad mainstream media. They are actually within the broad parameters. Okay, they will be critical at government, of course. There will be watchdogs of the broad ideology of South Africa, but they don't break out. They don't break out of that broad ideology. They are effective watchdogs of that ideology. While we are in a very strong critical position against that because of the fact it's wrong. You can't justify that, but you say that. And we say that the emperor is naked, and then everyone is saying no, hail to the emperor, and so that is difficult to break through, and that is why alternative media are so powerful nowadays. A channel like this, I want to congratulate you. It's a powerful media channel. In this COVID-19 period, I had more interviews on alternative media platforms than mainstream media platforms. So it's alternative media is quite amazing. From the Solidarity side, we started a media company, Marula Media. And Marula Media started as an alternative media company. It's now on the biggest Afrikaans media platform, on electronic media platform in the whole of South Africa. We are now fourth. Wow. So suddenly our Marula Media Company is now one of the biggest, and we are a minority language, one of the biggest media houses in South Africa. It started as alternative. It's still alternative because we work from the premises of the community, and it's actually powerful.
Right. Now, just when we're talking about the way the government is treating the impoverished whites in South Africa, there's been a lot of talk this week, and I've had a few videos up this week about the issue with the food parcels. Ramaphosa promised to provide food parcels to the people who are starving. Then it turns out that it was only going to be to the black community. And the councillors in many ANC municipalities then, when they got the money for these food parcels, just basically pocketed the money or bought the food parcels and kept the food parcels. And that happened all over the country. It is just absolutely, it boggles the mind that they can do that when people are starving. Tomorrow night, I'm going to be talking to Aneri, who's helping impoverished whites in the Vaal Triangle area. And then on Thursday night, I'm talking to Patrick, who's got a charity called Farmers Aid, which basically the last few days has delivered food parcels to about 200 starving white families. And these are all private initiatives. They're nothing to do with the government. The government is doing absolutely nothing to help the white community during this lockdown.
The fact is that that is actually, of course, it's shocking what the government is doing. This case that we have at this stage, we had to go to court to force government not to give help on a race base. It's absolutely shocking. But something else is happening. And the something else is happening is that the Afrikaner community especially is standing up in an amazing way. All this initiatives that you refer to is just amazing. We started with this fund, the Solidarity Crisis Fund. We hope to, because it's small donations of here, 100 Rand, and there, 50 Rand, and we aimed in the first place at 2 million. For 2 million Rand, we stand now very near to 6 million Rand. There's literally tens of organizations that now rise and help. And we see this help each other spirit at this stage in South Africa. And from the solidarity point of view, our point of view is that we don't want to be dependent on government. The fact is, we don't want to be in a situation where we are dependent on food parcels from government side. We don't want to be dependent for government for schools, mother tongue schools in Afrikaans. We don't want to be dependent on government universities. We don't come to a technical college. So what Solidarity then did was we started to build our own university, quite successful. There are now around about 1,400 students. We built now a new campus, 1.8 billion Rand, and we will have their place for 6,000 students. It will be a world-class university, top technology. We built the technical colleges, college software. It has now 1,200 students. Next year, we open a new campus, 400 million Rand, and we built a new campus. We just continue because we stay in South Africa. We plan to stay in South Africa. We're not going to go anywhere. And then we say, then we take self-responsibility. And that we see in this crisis as well, that more and more communities, more and more people take self-responsibility and say that we actually don't want to be dependent on government for this kind of the community. Is much stronger. We actually then focus on the power of the community.
Right. Now, while you're talking about universities, I had a lady on my show about a week ago, and she's a doctor who trained overseas because she couldn't get accepted in South Africa because her skin color was the wrong color, let me put it that way. Because even in the university, there's affirmative action when it comes to admitting students to study. And she was saying that when she came back to South Africa to try and become a doctor after she'd got a degree in Europe, the HPCSA, which is the health professional organization in South Africa, made it so difficult that it's impossible now for doctors who've trained overseas, apart from those who've trained in Cuba, who are always the disadvantaged people, the black people, they can come into South Africa and they can actually become doctors. But the other communities like the Indians and the whites who train overseas in desperation or study overseas in desperation, when they come back to South Africa, they haven't got a job. They can't actually practice their medical side. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is Solidarity looking at perhaps opening up a medical school where doctors can actually, or students can become doctors?
Okay. On the medical school issue, there's not a statutory space to do that in South Africa. The legislation doesn't allow. So we can't set up a private medical school in South Africa. It must be public. So South Africa does not have that specific framework. We look at this stage, training of nurses. We think that that degree of AS will be accredited this most probably still this year. So we have this medical studies, but not doctors, that we at academia will offer. So unfortunately, there's certain things that we can't do in the private environment, but the rest we can, and that we do at this stage. We train at this stage a law degree with BCom. We start next year with communications. We are preparing now for engineering, for teachers, etc. So there's a lot of things that we do, and I must say, the interesting thing that we experience, and I know there's a lot of things that's wrong in South Africa, and that I agree, and we talk about that today. But it's still an amazing country, and we enjoy it. We live here, and it's our place, and we still want to be here. And a lot of people can't go anywhere, so we must create a future here where we are prosperous. And the interesting thing is, if we take SaltTech, our technical college, like I said, that we train now 1,300 artisans per year.
Right.
And there's affirmative action in South Africa. But there's a waiting list, like I said here, a waiting list from employers in South Africa to employ our students that will study off at the end of the year, because of the fact that they are brilliantly trained. So at the end of the day, the market say, bring excellence into the market. So you can't say to the market all the time, the real good people can't come in because of affirmative action. And some stage the market say, okay, no, we want to bring them in. So our at SaltTech, they don't know what's affirmative action, because they are in a scarce and critical environment. Not everywhere so. Of course, there's a lot of people that is discriminated against because of their race. But the fact of the matter is that from the community point of view, we just continue, we do what we can do, we do it on the best way possible, and we build the future for us. The fact is, we've made a decision within the broader Solidarity movement, and maybe I can just say something about the broader Solidarity.
Sure, tell us.
We've made a deliberate decision that we are here to stay. We're not going to go anywhere. Now, if you decide you are going to stay, that per se is a very strong political statement, because you say that we're not going anywhere. So we stay here, and we're gonna you can do what you want, and you can put pressure on us, you can discriminate against us, but we're not going to go anywhere. The moment that you do that, there's a lot of energy coming loose, and that is happening. What's happening around the broader Solidarity movement? We have Solidarity, that's a trade union, but not the trade union in the classical sense of trade unionism. We've changed our whole trade union approach. It is much more of a labor movement. And then we have a social leg, the Solidarity Helping Hand. They are running all our social projects at this stage, also during COVID-19. Then we have AfriForum, that's our civil rights leg. They have a safety and security leg. They help with service delivery in local municipalities, etc. Then we have academia, that's our university. We have a technical college. We have a school support system. At this stage, just over 100,000 kids are at, we call that the cloud school, the Volk school. Just over 100,000 kids in South Africa is registered at our Volk school. And then we have a cultural leg, and we have the media leg. So we have an investment company, we have a financial services company, we have a property company, property development company that develop all our, for instance, campuses. They are going to develop our 1.8 billion rand new university campus, and all of this kind of actions built at this is part of a big program to make sure that we as Afrikaners can have a future where we can be safe and prosperous. The interesting thing is that although we challenge government, and we do that, we comes from different ideological point of views. we have actually also a kind of open relationship with government.
Right.
For instance, today we had a meetings with government about South African Airways and asked proposals on how then try to turn around something of the company that is actually bankrupt because of government. We just last week we made proposals to government on how to work healthy within the COVID-19 environment. Government then organized meetings for us with big business so that we can present it there. Just this weekend we presented cabinet with proposals on macroeconomic growth. So it's not so that there's absolutely a breakdown in relationships between the minority community and government. The fact of the matter is we are just far from each other from the from an ideological point of view.
Right. Now, one of the things that really came out with what you were saying there is that Solidarity is busy building. You know, it's creating, it's building schools, it's doing things with excellence. And that just, it's like, I always talk about Orania. Orania is the only town in South Africa that's run properly. You look at the chaos right across South Africa in the municipalities, it's disgusting. And, you know, you look at the ANC government with what they've done with the state-owned enterprises. They've torn the whole damn thing down. And here you've got organizations like Solidarity that are actually building things through all this.
That is because of that principle of self-responsibility. And we also work from a strong Christian base of calling, where you say that you take self-responsibility, you are responsible for your calling.
Right.
And then you do what you are supposed to do. Orania is a very, very good example of a town that simply takes self-responsibility. And what Orania actually is doing is to de facto put something on the ground. And then later on it gets a de jure status. Because the fact is, Orania has now several levels of recognition by government. And it's a small town, 1,800 people living there. It's run quite good. People feel free there. And they are recognized within this COVID-19 crisis. For instance, the broader municipality issued some regulations, and then it was recognized that Orania can issue their own regulations. That is recognition. So there's political recognition because of the fact that they simply put things on the ground. And that is the same kind of approach that the broader Solidarity movement has, where we say that we put de facto things on the ground, and later on we will get de jure recognition for that. But the stronger your de facto presence becomes, the bigger you actually grows.
Right.
If I look at what the situation was 10 years ago, then we did not have a university at all. We did not have a medical college. The Helping Hand was small. We did not have AfriForum was just established, was still small, and now we have 500,000 members at our different member institutions that pay. Every member pays around about an average of 100 rand a month. And with that 100 rand, we can establish safety structures, social structures, universities, technical colleges, etc. It's just an amazing model of a community in a majority environment that takes self-responsibility, that do that they are supposed to do, and make a huge, huge difference because of the fact we're going to stay, we're not going to go anywhere. And the other powerful thing that we have, of course, is we have ambassadors all over the world. We don't see Afrikaners in the rest of the world as people that betrayed us or something like that. Not at all. We see them as ambassadors in Australia, ambassadors in England, America, etc. All over the world, we have people that can help, that can support, that can make us strong. So the fact is, although we've lost a lot of people to other countries, the fact is we also became stronger because our footprint is actually bigger around the world.
Right. Well, I just have to say that the brain drain in South Africa is absolutely terrible. And now, obviously, investment's going to shoot up because they're now bringing in a wealth tax. Now, just talking about the future, I got some emails today where the police have clearly lost control in the townships. So there's one video that I was sent. I've forgotten where it was, but there are 2 or 3 police vehicles which are burning, and there's a crowd around them, and clearly those police have just run away. And then we have looting, where the police actually stand on the side and watch while a shop has been looted. We're moving in South Africa into a state of anarchy, the very early stages of an anarchy. What is Solidarities' plans should things totally break down in South Africa?
Okay. The problem with Afrikaners in South Africa is not in the numbers. If you look at Afrikaners, we are more people than a lot of other countries. Our problem at this stage is that we are so widespread over South Africa, all over the country. We live in 300 towns all over South Africa. So the one thing that we must do is concentrate. And there's a natural great track in South Africa to certain areas. So what Solidarity did was that we did some research on what that specific movement, the migration movement tendencies of Afrikaners are at this stage. So we identified 30 different towns where there's a natural move of Afrikaners to. And then we plan to concentrate much more. We plan to make sure that in that specific towns there's proper schools, there's proper health and safety facilities, there's proper safety structures, there's proper service delivery, etc. So we have quite an aggressive program of concentration at this stage to make sure that we can concentrate our resources as well, because we don't. We have a lot of resources. It's just too widespread. So that is what we're going to make sure of. For instance, all these 30 towns that we talk about is in a near distance to a small academia university center. So everyone can have access there. We make sure school, etc. So the important thing that we say is that we must make sure that we concentrate. 29 of those towns that we've identified are towns where a lot of Afrikaners still stay, and will even more in the future, but they are still in a minority. Even in Pretoria, where I live, where about 400 Afrikaners live, we expect that number to grow to about 500,000, 400,000, and it will grow to 500,000 in 2030. But we are still a small minority. There's one town, part of the city, that of course is outside this demographic streams of South Africa, and that's Orania. So that is the 30th town, and that is Orania, where you are a majority. So there's the 29th, where you are a minority and you concentrate, and then you have Orania, that where you can establish a majority, and so all together. It's actually a strong plan that we actually put in place now at this stage, so that we can be prosperous in the future.
Right. Okay. Now, I'm just going to address the side chat. Are there any questions that people would like to put in through here? Okay, I've got one here from Gordon. No, it's just I know there are quite a few. Okay, Gordon says, I would like to ask Dirk, where are these 30 towns?
Well, it's published on the Solidarity Movement website. So I think the easiest is to go there, because it's quite difficult to deal with all of them here. But what I can say is, of course, there's 3 big metros, where and that is where by far the majority live, and that is the Western Cape, around Cape Town. That's the one metro. Then the other one is the East Rand Industry. That's the second biggest the Cape, the third biggest, and then the third one is, of course, Pretoria. Then there's a next circle, and the next circle is towns like Bloemfontein, Nelspruit, and then Rustenburg, and Potchefstroom, etc. And then there's a smaller circle around that. But all of that is on the Solidarity movement webpage. I just want to say an interesting thing that we see is that the migration in South Africa is naturally to these places, and the migration to the cities is quite still big. And the interesting thing is there's a one belief that that the big migration is to the Western Cape at this stage. It's of course not true. There is definitely a migration to the Western Cape, but the biggest migration of Afrikaners at this stage is to Pretoria, the biggest by far. So Afrikaners naturally move more and more to Pretoria from the countryside, and so that's the interesting tendencies. And of course, then we see a gradual growth in Orania as well, but of course that within the bigger context, still very, very small.
Right. Okay, I've got a couple more questions here. Tace asked, what is Dirk's view on secession, and why don't they as a union support it?
What we believe is what I sketched a bit earlier. We believe in de facto realities that you put on the ground. And de facto realities get later on de jure status. The critique that I have against simply secession movements at this stage in South Africa is simply where. The fact is that Afrikaners are in the minority everywhere.
Right.
So concentration is necessary so that you can have de facto realities. But I just want to come back, and I know you've mentioned Orania. That is why I'm coming back every time to Orania.
Right.
Orania, de facto put something on the ground near, and to an extent, they have powers that the national government has. They declare their own public holidays. So the fact of the matter is, because they established de facto a reality, then actually in reality they in some within the legislation framework of South Africa, they actually in a sense it's a deed of secession, but it's a de facto secession. It's not a de jure secession.
Right. Now I've got another question here for you, and it's one that's very close to my heart. And that is Solidarity able to assist with South African heritage preservation, something the state isn't helping with? And before you answer that, I just want to tell you that I have been to so many museums in South Africa after 1994, and you can see there's a huge, the museums are not being curated properly. The black curators have absolutely no interest in South African history, and in fact, if you go to Bloem, to the old state president's house, you'll find there cabinets there that have been rifled. There's nothing in them. They've just got the old supports, and all the history is gone. It's been taken. And this has happened across a number of museums in South Africa. And I'll give you a classic example. There's this little town called Griquas Town, and it's actually the oldest town north of the Orange River. Dates back to about 1817 or 1815. And they have a museum there which is tied up with Robert Moffat. It's called the Moffat Museum. And back in 2011, the curator who'd been running the museum for 30 years, her name was Hetta Hager, lovely lady, beautifully maintained museum. She got to retirement age, and she got an email saying, look, you're retired now, we've got someone else to take over the museum. And this came out of the blue. And she said, look, I'm happy to keep on doing it because it's been my life. And they said, no, we don't need you there anymore. And she found out the person who they put in charge of the museum was the cleaning lady. That's at the Mary Moffat Museum in Griquaton. Now, you can imagine this is what's happening to the heritage of South Africa. It's a very disturbing area. The Voortrekker Monument is probably a standout in that it's so well maintained. But even if you go to Paul Kruger's house in Pretoria now, and you live in Pretoria, you can go and have a look.
I do.
When did you last go and have a look at that one?
Yeah, about 2-3 years ago.
Okay. Now,
exactly.
Did you notice that some stuff had kind of gone missing?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
Yes. You see, the thing is, there's logic in that, eh? Because why will South Africa manage its heritage, especially Afrikaner heritage, more effectively than they manage their electricity supplier or the public health care? If the public health care collapses, why do you think for one moment the heritage will be protected in a better way? And if they transform museums, if they transform all institutions, then museums will be transformed as well. If they get lost of institutional memories at ESCOM, they will get lost of institutional memories of small museums in small towns as well. The thing is that the challenge here is, again, and this makes it so difficult, is that the community must take more responsibility for their own heritage, but the commercial side of heritage is not that simple. You mentioned the Voortrekker Monument, and
right.
Well, there's a reason why the Voortrekker Monument looks much better than Paul Kruger House, and that is because the Voortrekker Monument is community owned. The government has no say in the Voortrekker Monument. It's 100% in the hands of the community. Solidarities on the board of directors there as well. AfriForum is there on the board of directors. The Solidarity Helping Hand is on the board of directors of the Voortrekker Monument. So the fact of the matter is the community is quite actively involved there, and I think that's the difference. Although now we have, of course, a lot of pressure on the Voortrekker Monument because of the COVID-19 crisis. So we have difficulties to maintain commercially. So, but the fact of the matter is, it's not in the hands. And the point is, how can we make sure that the community takes more self-responsibility of their own heritage? That we do more and more. The Federation of Afrikaner Cultural Organizations, the FAK, also is also now part of the broader Solidarity movement. So they take that responsibility on our behalf. And then we also have a publishing company, Kral Uitgewers, and they take again responsibility to make sure that we can publish good. We focus on history books, or good quality history books of South Africa. So we write up the heritage of South Africa, and the FAK must take responsibility to pick it.
Right. Yeah, I just think it's tragic when you see the heritage being so badly treated. I mean, it is, whether they like it or not, it is part of South African history, and it should be respected, which it has not been.
It's absolutely so. But the fact of the matter is, if you look at the Apartheid Museum, if you look at other heritage sites in South Africa, it's also managed very badly.
Yeah.
So it's of course I think there's of course a feeling of resistance from their side against Afrikaner history, but the fact of the matter is that there's a management problem in general.
Right. Okay. Now, Devin Hansen has said or asked, "We've been trying to do steam preservation, steam trains, and all the clubs are now failing without legal and financial assistance."
Sure. As a general rule, is that subsidized by government in any way? So the question I just have is that clubs, is it community-based clubs? Because I understand it 100%. How do you sustain clubs like that commercially? That's the challenge. So that is why the route that we've decided on to say that the community must take self-responsibility is not that simple route. And I think he actually explained now in a very micro level how difficult that is to go that route. So that is not that simple. I understand it 100%.
Right. Okay. Now, Johnny Mayers asked Dirk about the structure of Solidaritate from the Solidaritate Trust and where AfriForum fits in. Important question to understand the whole organization.
Thank you, Yanni. Yes, the structure that we have is that we have a trust, and the trust is called the Solidarity Movement Trust. Now, the trust is the institution where all the different institutions in the broader solidarity movement are actually aligned. Now, that trust has a vision, and that vision is to create a future where we can be safe and prosperous. In Afrikaans, it's vry, veilig en voorspoedig. Free, prosperous, and safe and prosperous. And that is all the institutions within the broader movement is aligned to that vision. And then we work from the same principle basis. We work from the idea of calling. And then there's a lot of institutions then that must take responsibility on different fields to actually get to this vision. The one is in the work environment, that is Solidarity, that takes responsibility for that. Then we have the training leg. At the training, we have the technical college, the university, and company for further education, and of course then the schools. And then the third leg is then civil rights, and that is AfriForum lies there. So AfriForum takes responsibility for all of that, safety, and they look at service delivery at on municipality level, etc. Then the next leg, we have the cultural leg, that is the Federation of Afrikaans Cultural Organizations, lies in that specific leg. Then we have a leg for media, and there we have a network of radio stations that is part of us. In fact, we produce radio programs for 52 different radio stations. Our radio drama that we are quite proud of has more listeners than the national broadcasters, 1.1 million listeners. And then Marula Media, of course, they have now 2 million unique visitors per month, so they are quite successful. That is on the media side. And then we have, of course, the financial side. That is our investment company, our financial services company, our property company, our property development company. Then we have funds where people can donate to. We have a fund, a legal fund. We have a built fund that institutions are built from, and we have a educational fund. So that is different funds where people can contribute. So we actually must take responsibility for a lot of state functions for a minority community, of course, without taxes. So, so how are we financed then? In the first place, through voluntary contributions. Like I said, around about 500,000 people that contribute around about 100 rand per month. Then we have the companies, we have the investment company, the financial service company, and then we have just people that donate, etc. And all of this makes it possible to have a venture of literally billions of rands. That is by far the biggest civil movement in South Africa. And then we also feel quite strong about social entrepreneurship, so that we can make sure that the civil organizations all has its own economic engine as well. So Yanni, yes, that's the broader structure that we have. And interesting enough, we are quite federated in the sense that we say that all these different institutions, if you count all the institutions together, because we have the publishing, we have a company that make films and documentaries, etc. That's just over the 20 companies that's part of institutions that's part of the broader solidarity movement. with the same kind of vision and so on. But they are not. They are very federal. So everyone takes its own responsibility, and we don't control everything from above, from a central point of view. But what we are bound to is central ideas. So the central ideas actually bound all these different institutions together.
Right. Now, there are a couple of questions that I've got coming out of what you just told us. The first one is probably the most concerning. With the expropriation without compensation, are you concerned that this ANC government won't turn around to you and say, hey, you got a whole bunch of money in your trust accounts, we want that money to support the economy? What sort of position do you have to remedy that if they try that sort of thing?
Well, the fact is that a central government, of course, well, they can do anything if they want. So nobody anywhere in the world has absolute assurances. But the fact of the matter is, if we are at that stage where they can come and take money from you, that's theft, and the Constitution of South Africa does not allow that. But the fact is that what we quite believe is the stronger you are, the more difficult it becomes to take. So it's not that simple. If you are strong de facto organization with strong de facto structures on the ground, to say that listen, we want to take. That is not South Africa is not in isolation. The fact of the matter is we are an open economy. We have within a global environment. So it's really not that simple just to take. And in all respect, we are still very, very far from that in South Africa.
Right, and I should just say to people watching that the word FAC is not a naughty word. It's an acronym, Afrikaans acronym. What does it actually stand for?
That's the Federation for Afrikaans Cultural Organizations.
Okay, cool. Now, your organization also took the government to task about their suggestion that they're going to be raiding the pension funds and putting that into state-owned enterprises, didn't you?
Absolutely, we are still in that battle. And I think we've pushed back the wave, but that battle is not won yet. The fact is that government is actually, in large extent, bankrupt. And a last resort for them is, of course, pension funds. And to say that we have prescribed assets. Now, prescribed asset is not that strange in the rest of the world. There's a lot of countries that has prescribed assets. But then it is in viable, good, healthy organizations where people are willingly, for instance, invest in state effects or so. In South Africa's situation, it's not like that. It is not like we have a successful ESCOM, come invest and let South Africa grow and you will have a growth in your investment. The fact is, in this specific case, you want to invest in a bankrupt company, and nobody will do that voluntarily. So the moment that you are set in a situation that we have to force down by legislation certain investments because no market will do that voluntarily, then it's a bad investment. The fact of the matter is that pension funds are invested at this stage in South Africa, and that's the healthy investments. So what you now want to do is to withdraw it from a strong side of the economy where you have a good investment, and you want to go and invest that same money in a bad investment, and
right.
That makes no economic sense. So we are in a battle with government about this. I'm just afraid that this whole COVID crisis put South Africa now in such an economic disaster that it can happen that they now say, well, no, we don't have a choice as some prescribed assets. That's of course not so that you take someone's pension and all of someone's pension and then invest it in government institutions, it will be a percentage, but we will have a flattened growth of your pension funds. It's not that they will take all, but the fact of the matter is that it's not acceptable at all. So we will definitely, and we will definitely still fight it.
Right. Now, apparently what Ramaphosa announced tonight is that he's going to be putting 500 million rand into the economy, and I think he got a loan from somewhere. I don't think that's going to help much.
Yeah, the problem is just loans must be repaid.
Yeah.
and that's the crisis at this stage. But 500 million is not that much. I could not follow Ramaphosa.
Oh, sorry, 500 billion rand.
Say again?
500 billion rand, not million.
Oh, 500 billion.
Yeah.
I suppose 500. okay, that's more. Yes, the problem is just that we don't have the capacity for any money to be loaned at this stage. So that is a bit of a crisis. But I just want to say that I have a much more important meeting tonight, of an engagement tonight, than to listen to the president, and that is a meeting of you, Scott.
Well, thank you. Look, I believe me, I've been looking forward to this discussion, and I don't care what Ramaphosa says. He never keeps his word anyway. Now, I've got a bunch more questions here. First one, why can't Solidarity arrange an international trust fund where we can divert our taxes with ultimatums to the ANC, let them earn their income standing together with funds protecting us?
Yeah, of course, there's a lot of pressure on us for what is called the tax revolt, to take the lead in supporting people to withhold taxes, to put more pressure on government. The thing is just that what we can't do is to put people on risk from a strategic point of view. And at this stage, of course, it will be illegal to withhold trusts, taxes. So, of course, the principle is that at this stage we pay taxes, but we don't get services. So there's a breach of a contractual arrangement between the taxpayer and the government.
Right.
So from that point of view, where you can say, well, it's fairly fair not to pay if you don't get services. But the fact of the matter is, and then we get a lot of pressure on that we will not take the lead in that kind of tax revolt. I will come back to the international now. So we can't do that, although sometimes I feel I want to do that. But there's a lot of other ways that you can use legal measures to put tax pressure on government. Now, one of that, of course, was the application that we brought for business rescue of the South African Airways.
Right.
That specific application of ours was nothing less than a tax revolt from taxpayers, where taxpayers said that, listen, we use this legal avenue and we're going to put pressure on you. We, for instance, started with a legal action against Brian Molefe from Eskom that actually took illegally pension money. And we've won that case, and that was nothing else than a tax revolt from taxpayers that said that we will not allow you to take our tax money anymore. We did that with Denel, we did that with Claudio Motseneng of the SABC, and we've won that specific case, and we got cost not only against the SABC but against him in his person. So there's a lot of other ways that you, as taxpayers, can make sure that you put pressure on government.
Right.
We started, and that's something else than you propose. We started now with a process to set up an international solidarity movement fund. So we were very busy with registration processes in Europe. so that we can get donations. But that's something else. That's donations that we get internationally that can support the cause of the minority community, specifically Afrikaners in South Africa.
Right. Now I've got another question here for you from Dirk. He says, I'm a Solidarity member and just curious to know how you protect membership fees and contributions against a collapsing and junk status rand, not to lose capital investment value.
Sure, it's a very difficult question, because we sit here in absolutely doubled crisis. The first crisis that we had was the crisis that we that built up to the COVID-19 crisis, and there we already sat in a real economic crisis, and then we have now this double crisis, the COVID. On that, the rest of the world did not sit with the same double problem, and the rest of the world will recover much easily from this specific crisis. We now started with a document, and I will ask Dirk to follow us on that. That we call it the Solidarity Work Recovery Plan. We want to make sure, especially our members, but also the broader community around our members, where we can make sure that we can get them back in the active economy and that we can protect them within the active economy. Now, there we look at interesting things. In the first place, that's a long discussion maybe, but we start now with what we call the old word guilds. And the guilds is, of course, this occupational organization. But we use the word guild because the old guilds has much more of a cultural base. And we want that. Where we say all the attorneys in South Africa, all the nurses in South Africa, all the engineers, all the Afrikaans artisans, etc., form actually communities where they support each other, where they are networks, they protect that specific occupation, they take responsibility to bring young people into that specific occupation. So the power of the community to protect their specific sphere are quite powerful. So if you want to ask me what Solidarity would do to protect the economic sphere of a specific community of you in the workplace, then it will be done via the rest of the community of your guild, of your occupational organization. So we started with that about a year ago, and it's a great case. People from different occupations joined Equico, which is on the one side. And then on the other side, we, of course, mobilize capital so that we can have training institutions, etc. And then we just started with the power of crypto technology. And that is something that we now look at and will announce very dynamic announcements in a couple of months.
Right. Now, we're talking about working together. Let me put this hypothetical question to you. There are a number of smaller groups. I mean, when you compare them to Solidarity, they're tiny, but they're all doing, or they have different functions. And I'm talking about groups like Boerelichian, like ULA, Zeitlanders, USAF. If they were able to get together as a group and work together, which is, you have no idea how hard it is to get that to happen. But if they were to be able to work together, have like a central committee, would that be something that Solidarity would be willing to work with, just to have that extension?
Yes, of course. One must work together on different grounds and different ways, etc., and see how one can support each other. But I don't believe in this old idea that there must be one big organization. I think that more is sometimes stronger, because what happens is everyone takes responsibility of that specific area of mine. I have a passion about the small. I'm only small. I have a couple of 100 members, or of 100 members, of 20 members, but I take responsibility for my area. And the moment that you you have this huge central structure, then it happens that you are actually killing small initiatives. So I'm supporters of a lot of small initiatives that takes responsibility all of its own area. So I don't think there must be one big structure, although I'm quite comfortable with the idea that one must have open communication, must see that it's not necessary to duplicate, etc. But let me take, for example, this. You refer to this different people that helps with in different communities. You will speak tomorrow with someone that had the food kitchen, and the day thereafter, people that helped in Van Bijl Park. It's small people or small groups of people that takes responsibility for that area. They do something else than the Solidarity Helping Hand. The Solidarity Helping Hand do a lot of things. They do from a central base. We do a lot of hundreds of projects, etc., or thousands of projects at this stage. But let's say Solidarity Helping Hand has 1,000 projects. Then still, if it because of a small community project in Stilfontein, there's 1,001. If it was only Solidarity Helping Hand, the one would not be there. So I am quite supportive of the idea of rather many than one, rather smaller than big, rather federal than central. So I have not that big problem if there's no big unity movement on the Afrikaners. Afrikaners are stronger if there's more organizations.
Okay, now the reason I raise that is because there are a number of groups in South Africa that I've actually spoken to the guy heading up that particular group, and from what you've just said, you'd be happy to talk to these different groups. What I might do is I might just contact them and say, hey, who would they speak to? It wouldn't be yourself, would it? Would it be someone lower down in the organization?
I think the easiest way is actually to start with me, and then because it will differ. If it's someone that works on the cultural environment, I will refer them to the FHK, and if it's service delivery, AfriForum, and it will differ. So I think the easiest, you contact me, and I'm Dirk at Solidarity or Solidariteit, both Afrikaans and English. .co.za, and please contact me, and then we can see what one can do, what kind of talks that one can have, and they can be complementary to each other.
Right, I'll certainly do that. That's fantastic, Dirk. And just on that same issue, one of the areas that this channel works closely with is people like Patrick, who's got a very small NGO called Farmers Aid South Africa. And this guy, he's in his 50s, he's always on the road delivering food parcels to hungry white people and starving white people, because they're the ones who've been kind of left out of the chain by the ANC government. Is there any part of Solidarity that can help him in any way, maybe just through manpower or contacts with supermarkets with getting food? Maybe funding, whatever. Is there some kind of a organization within Solidarity that could perhaps assist people like Patrick?
Typically, the Solidarity Helping Hand will be that organization, but I want to ask Patrick to contact me. That email address that I just gave, please contact me, Patrick, and let's see. It sounds to me that he actually does wonderful work, and I have so much appreciation of that, because it's of course of its own time helping and serving, and I have real appreciation for the Patricks of the world. I hope there's thousands of Patricks. So please, Patrick, contact me, and one can see. Maybe I can't promise anything, but what I can say is that what I can contact the right persons, let's see, maybe they can come something from that.
Fantastic. Look, I think Erica's here on the side chat. If Erica is here, Perhaps you could pass that on to Patrick for us. If Erica isn't here, I will certainly speak to Patrick about it. I'm actually seeing Patrick on Thursday night on the channel. We're going to be actually talking about his operation last week where he fed over 170 starving families. It's just absolutely desperate, some of these people.
Absolutely great. It's absolutely great.
Now, I've got another question for you from Property Power. He says, Scott, ask Dirk, why is the petrol price not down? Oil is now nearly $0 per barrel.
The petrol price will follow. That's part of the good news is that I see we will see a fall of the petrol price. The formula forced that. So we will see that. Of course, the bad news of that is that this kind of petrol price, of course, put a lot of pressure on petrol chemical giants like, for instance, Sasol. I think Sasol will have, they already had some structural problems, and the specific oil price crisis will have a tremendous negative effect in South Africa on Sasol, and with all the ripple effects of that. But the formula will force the petrol price down. I think we will see that in the next price when the next price announcement will be done. It's well, that's my opinion.
Okay, fantastic. Now, Johnny Meyer asks, how does Solidarity see the future of our country?
We see the future of our country that more communities will take more responsibility. The fact is, if I can sketch a triangle, and that is why I need my video camera, because so that I can explain with my hands. Take a triangle. We sit with on the top of the triangle with government that is getting weaker, but stronger. So they want to centralize. But the moment that the government gets weaker, the natural thing that happens that the private sector take up that space, and the community, that's the other side, the bottom other corner, and the one corner and the bottom is private sector. They take the that vacuum that is created by state, and the community also takes the vacuum. The community organizations, of course, they are there for community, not necessarily for profit like us. So we establish schools, universities, technical colleges, because that vacuum is created by the state. On the other side, the private sector takes up responsibility for security, for health services. And we will see that more and more, that the private sector will fill vacuum. So we will see that in South Africa, we will have an environment that is much more filled by community and with by private sector. Then what's important is, throughout the world, the role of the national state is eradicated. So we see less state in the rest of the world and more community. And the reason for that is, of course, the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution puts power in the hands of communities and in the private environment. And the government simply can't resist the power of the fourth industrial revolution. Let me take, for example, the university that we've built. The university that we built, we use absolute top technology, and we could, the first time in the world that this specific technology is used in the tertiary educational sector, we use it at academia. So 10 years ago, we could not do that. It was too expensive to establish a university. And now here comes new technology, and this new technology makes it possible for us to establish a new university. And that is powerful. New fourth industrial university, power in the hands of the community. The same with electricity supply. Energy supply in South Africa, the new kind of technology that will be in hand, that will liberate electricity supplies in South Africa is here. And South Africa will be forced, because they're getting weaker and weaker, they have a lot of pressure on them, they will be forced to deregulate and decentralize electricity generation in South Africa. And now suddenly there's technology to pick that up. School. The reason why we have now more than 100,000 kids that register with our school system is because of new technology. New technology makes it possible to get answers for questions that you thought in the past there is no answers for. And that is what you can hold on to. For one moment, you think there's no future in South Africa, there's no hope in South Africa. In the next moment, there will be technological new technologies, and there will be new community structures, new private structures that will get answers that you never thought the answers will be. And national government, although they want to centralize more, they're going to be weaker, and the fourth industrial revolution is going to put power in our hands that we must just make use of. And the whole solidarity movement at this stage is growing because of that. We establish new answers that one actually thought there's not answers for these questions in the past. So I see this also weak government that wants to control more, but I see more private, more community, more technology that will make it possible for us to live within the South African reality.
Right. Now, just as a thought, don't you think that with what's happening right now in South Africa, the people, specifically in the townships, are going to be so upset and feel so misled by the ANC government that that's going to cause a huge amount of conflict between the average person in the township and the ANC politicians?
You see, it's true. But what the government did is they bound the masses, the poor masses, they bound into their structures via a system of grants. So the masses know where my grant comes from. So I can resist just for so long because my grants come from this specific government. Then the middle class is bound by affirmative action. It's a racial solidarity. And then the elite class is bound by black economic empowerment. So I think at this stage we set this, yes, of course there's resistance, but the resistance is within the bigger ANC environment. The opposition is actually within the ANC democracy, one can call it that way. I don't see at this stage that the resistance becomes so big that the ANC will be toppled. In fact, if it happens, it will be from the left. And so we will not sit in a better situation. But so the fact of the matter is, I think the ANC successfully actually different sectors of the black community within the ANC ideology.
Right. Now I have another question for you here, Dirk. Seeing as our religion, history, news are lies, does Solidarity not think that this needs to be tackled differently? Go back and seek and distribute the truth. Clean up from the beginning.
Just say it again. I just want to listen quite carefully.
Sure. The question is, seeing that our religion, history, and news are lies, does Solidarity not think that this needs to be tackled differently, i.e. go back and seek and distribute the truth and clean up from the beginning?
I think behind that specific question is most probably much more than the question, because I'm not sure what the specific listener asked me. So I will actually want to ask if that listener can give a bit more a context to that question.
Right.
But I just can't understand, because I think he's asking something that I don't hear in the specific question. I think he has more that he wants to ask. So maybe he can just give a bit more context to the specific question.
What I read into that question is he's basically saying that the early history of South Africa is being misrepresented, and so is the religion, and the news, the mainstream media are fake, so they've got their own narrative. How can Solidarity put that ship back on course so that people know the truth. I think that's basically what he's saying.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. If that's the context, that is what Solidarity is actually doing, or the bigger Solidarity movement is doing every day. We fight the different narratives. We had a discussion with the ANC top six a year or two ago, and I said to Kweli Mantashe, well, Mr. Mantashe, our battle is a battle of history, and not necessarily only of a battle of ideas. It's a battle of narratives, because the fact is that the narratives that's now presented are quite in conflict with the narrative that I have. The narrative about my dad is not the narrative of a criminal, and because I know my dad, and their narrative is that my dad is a criminal, and of my dad's generation is criminals, and not only that, but my whole history is criminalized. But I have different narratives because I know the story of the Afrikaners.
Right.
I know where they come from. I know their history, etc. So you're quite correct that we have to break away from the skewed narratives about the history of South Africa. And the problem at this stage is that it is accepted. It's holy ground that you can't attack that specific narratives, and we definitely do that. And that's also the role of your publishing company, to bring out books that write down the narratives, good books. We don't want a perfect situation where we present the Afrikaner history as just good and there's nothing wrong with them. And, we don't want to romanticize the Afrikaner history. That's not what we want to do. No history in the world is just a romantic history. But we just want to have a fair history of the Afrikaners. And that is what we want to do. I think it's absolutely necessary to do that, to get new ideas, new narratives, and correct narratives, and not to fall for the skewed narrative of the victor.
Right. Now, I've got another question here. Is Solidarity active anywhere in Natal?
Yes, we are. We have an office in Natal, much smaller than the rest of the country. We have Northern Natal office, and then also in Richards Bay, and Newcastle. We are quite strong represented, especially there because of Metal. But of course, Solidarity's base is Afrikaner base, and therefore our logic state is more where the concentration of Afrikaners are. But saying that, that is from the trade union side. From the helping hand side, we have several branches in Natal that help, especially with poverty relief. And then from the AfriForum side, we have several branches in Natal as well, because that is more micro. So in the Solidarity trade union side, we need big industry, and but Helping Hand and AfriForum has several branches throughout the whole of Natal.
Right. Now, Anton Hugo has asked, currently 2,280 soldiers have been deployed. Ramaphosa just deployed 73,180 additional soldiers until June the 26th. That is the entire army. Do we need to worry?
Yes. What we need to worry about is that the COVID-19 curve is not flattened yet. That we're gonna see a rise in that specific curve within the next month or two, and I think the government is quite concerned about what the effect of that will be on social stability of South Africa. I'm quite aware of this this decision. We knew that before tonight, where things are on its way to, and I think the government wants to manage social instability they are worried about that. The fact is that we must not be naive about the COVID-19 crisis in South Africa. If you compare us with the rest of the world, our figures are still very low, but we can expect a rise in our infection rate, and I think government is preparing for that. Not only social instability, but also they want to be supportive of on the health side as well. I have a concern about government's ability to manage a specific crisis. I've seen how they manage the rest of South Africa, so I have a concern on that. Yeah. But we must say in South Africa that they still have time to come. But it's, of course, this is not a South African phenomenon. It's a worldwide phenomenon.
Yeah. Now, I've got to ask you a question which I think is really the elephant in the room. And that is that I think that in a first world country like Australia or somewhere in Europe, the lockdown can work because you can have social distancing. Now, the problem in South Africa is that you've got these townships where people live cheek and jowl. They've got 5 families in one little shack or something like that. There is no social distancing. And to exacerbate that, what happens is they go out in taxis and, the whole thing is completely chaotic. The whole idea of the lockdown is for people to have social distancing. If you don't have it, you might as well not have the lockdown. So my question, Dirk, is why do we have a lockdown in South Africa when it's not going to work because there's no social distancing being enforced, and it's impossible in townships to have it because of the number of people living in a shack, for example, when you consider how it's destroying what's left of the economy. The health minister said a few weeks ago, he said, look, we expect 60 to 70% of South Africans to get COVID-19. And obviously you've got the vulnerable groups like the elderly, but if you got rid of the lockdown and you isolated the elderly as far as you could, and yes, I get it that in the townships you've got elderly as well, but that COVID-19 is going to go screaming through the townships anyway. So those elderly who are vulnerable would be vulnerable anyway with the lockdown. So I get back to the question, wouldn't it be better to just scrap the lockdown, let South Africa continue as it was before the lockdown, have this huge curve that goes right up through the ceiling, it'll come down very fast through the other side, because most of the people are outside of the vulnerable group, it'll allow the economy to start growing or to try and resuscitate itself. Just extending this lockdown, just to me, seems to be killing the whole thing. And especially the stupidity, like banning hot food from being served. I don't understand their logic.
Yes, there's a lot of total irrational regulations in South Africa, and because of this absolute irrational regulations, the lockdown will implode on itself. And the problem is that, and that was our cautions as well, that we had the 21 days and then the extension of another 2 weeks. The problem is with the extension is that it can lead, and I think there's a strong possibility for that still, the lockdown can implode on itself because the people simply at some stage must make choices between the COVID-19 virus and to survive hunger. And then it is undisciplined. So if you don't have a system where you actually get a balance between economic activity and fighting the virus, then the fact is that the economy will actually implode on the efforts to try to fight the virus, and that will have devastating effects, not only for the economy, but for fighting the virus as well. So that is why it's we feel strong about, yes, of course, aggressive against the virus, and we do believe that there's logic in pushing back the curve for the simple reason we don't have health facilities in South Africa. If we reach the peak of the curve too soon, then the whole health system will implode. So I can understand the logic that you want to push that back, but we don't understand is that you allow the economic crisis curve to grow as well. because the crisis is if you get the curve, the COVID-19 curve, that reach its peak, and you get the economic crisis, that curve that it peak, it's catastrophic, and that is the challenge for South Africa. Is those two peaks must not meet each other, and at this stage, I have a concern that it can happen. So we've developed a quite comprehensive, what we call a code of good practice, to get people back at work, and so that we can stimulate economic activity, because that's an absolutely necessity to fight the virus as well. So we will see what happens now with that. There's no doubt that we must declare all workers as essential work. It's not only essential workers, essential, actually all work. So we believe that everyone that can work healthy must go back to work. The fact is that workplaces, and we see that now in the mining environment. The mining environment start up again now, and they are now at around about some mines at 30% capacity, and they can go to about 50% capacity. And the way that they managed the virus at this stage is much more disciplined than in much places where people live, because there's discipline, there's regulations, there's workplace structure, etc. So sometimes the workplace is more safe in a healthy environment. Now we keep people from the workplace, keep them in back at their houses. That is actually there's more risks in where they live than where they work. So I'm absolutely in favor of that we must get the economy back going.
Right, and apparently that's not on the agenda for the ANC government at the moment, which is just so destructive.
Yes.
Next question. Do Solidarity know why there is so much pressure against us as pensioners, and why we are being excluded to receive hot meals or food parcels due to our colour? How can Solidarity help us?
Solidarity already started with a whole project on supporting elderly specifically. So we have several. We have 67 different institutions that we help at this stage, mostly elderly homes, where we specifically help and support. The cooked food delivered for elderly people, it's absolutely absurd that you can't do that anymore. Of course, what happens now is that you have a regulation that forbids that. Then there's a company like Meals on Wheels. They actually delivered to elderly people at home. So they enabled them to eat healthy, and it's not necessary for those elderly persons to go to shops. Now there's a regulation that forbids that. And this poor people sit there, that's their only healthy meal. Some of them can't go to shops, and others are now forced to go to shops, much more risky if it comes to COVID-19.
Right.
So Solidarity Helping Hand had a whole campaign against government on this again. Those of you that maybe watch Ian News tonight, we had a story on Ian News on that. But that is something that's high on our agenda. I understand 100% this problem. We are aware of that, and it's very high on our agenda.
Right. Now, I've got another question here. Michelle says, please ask Dirk if he knows about Operation Chariot. Have you heard of that?
I don't know about that. Maybe a bit more background.
From what I can gather, it's basically the role the army are going to be playing in South Africa, and I think it's quite an aggressive role.
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I think that's is in line with the announcement that Ramaphosa made tonight, and that is an issue of concern. The problem that I have, if I can look at a bit more the story behind, and that is that government gets a lot of central power at this stage. during the COVID-19 time and the regulations that they can issue. And the problem is that is natural within their ideology. And the question is that crisis-based, or will they keep some of the central powers after the crisis as well? And that is the issue of concern that we must have. A government that wants to keep keep the central position of them even after the COVID-19 crisis.
Right. Okay, now Bridget's asked, the president is still pushing rapid economic transformation. Does that mean they want to speed up their looting and racism?
It's absolutely absurd. Within the COVID-19 crisis, they have still a transformational ideology that is race-based. We see this in this case that we have against the Department of Tourism. There's no sense in. You can't believe that in a crisis like this, you'd still use race. So that is absolutely not acceptable at all. So we definitely have a real concern that that within the crisis, they still want, in the first place, to have race-based policies, but in the second place, to still think that you can transform South Africa from a central base, where you transform South Africa from more centralized power. Remember, we've talked about the expropriation without compensation. That's, of course, not empowerment for individuals. That is centralizing the land of South Africa. So it's not giving it back to, and that will be also wrong, but it's not giving it back to individuals. It's centralizing. So we sit this in a South Africa where more centralized power, and that is that's the core of the problem at this stage.
Right. Okay. Now I've just been given a clarification on what Project Charity is. It's the ANC telling the Africans in townships that the whites bought all the food, and when the food runs out, they must get the food from the whites. Apparently, that's have you heard? That's a conspiracy. But have you heard anything on that?
I haven't heard on this that specifically. I heard different the same line conspiracies. We at Solidarity don't work with conspiracies. We have a whole research institute that makes sure that go and make sure that things, because otherwise it will just okay. What the situation is bad enough. It's not necessary to make it even worse via conspiracy. So we try not to follow conspiracies. We try to rectify information to make sure that we work with our truth. So, but it doesn't say that we must not take notice of things, and we must follow that up and make sure. About the specific, I heard that more than once now, the specific, and that's something that one must look at, but we don't have any confirmation on that.
Right. Now, Marie asked, Dirk, what happened with the Sasol shares case?
Yes, Marie, in December, it will be in court. Just a bit of background on that, of course. We first had the action where, and that was just amazing, in Secunda, where 5,000 people from the community and the workers, etc., took part in a strike action to pressure on Sasol because of the fact that they only awarded shares, I spoke about that a bit earlier on, for black employees. Someone that worked there 30 years got nothing. Someone that worked there 3 days got 500,000 rand simply because of the color of that person's skin. But that's the absurdity. Then we referred it to court, and the court process is quite slow in South Africa. But the good news is in December this year, I think it's November this year, we will be in court. That court date is fixed. And we also brought some other similar cases, and at this stage it seems that some of these cases will be all heard on one day. It will be a major day in transformation in South Africa. But the fact is that we must not only fight this in South Africa as well, we must take that to international fora as well. But the fact is, yes, that case, we have finally a date for that.
Right. Now, Dirk Dachbreker has asked, can the cloud school from Solidarities be done at home schooling? Will it be more affordable, as I'm considering the GED route?
Yes, the cloud school is supportive. It's not a curriculum, a full curriculum. So you need a full curriculum, and the cloud school will support you on that. So at this stage, it's supportive. A lot of homeschoolers use cloud school, but they have a full curriculum that is supported by cloud school. And cloud school, for instance, supports schools, public schools and private schools. So it's a blended learning model, but it's not a full curriculum that you can follow at home school, but it will help you tremendously. And I want to invite people at this stage, till the end of the COVID-19 crisis, we open up for cloud school for free. So you can now go and register and see what's there for you and what worked for you and so on. Unfortunately, we did not. We started with the development of this, and we gradually started to develop and plan to develop everything in the next 3 years. And then the COVID-19 came, and suddenly everyone wants an offering. So we now try to do what we plan to do in 3 years. We plan to do in 6 months. So we will do a lot of new developments in the next 6 months. So it's still not that comprehensive that it can offer you a full offering that you can use at as homeschool. There's a lot of other products as well for homeschool, and cloud school can support you a lot.
Fantastic. Johan Smith has asked, is it true that AfriForum and Solidarity only help people if they're a member of the organization?
That's not true. If you look at the situation at this stage, let's for instance take the cloud school. Cloud school, a Volk school, has now 100,000 kids that registered during the COVID-19 period, and I have no idea how many of them are members of Solidarity or not. But so we help all those kids. I think for the most people that is helped now by Solidarity Helping Hand is not members of Solidarity. If you look at AfriForum that is fixing potholes in communities, they are not only fixing AfriForum members' potholes, they fix all potholes to the benefit of the whole community. So that's simply not true. What's true is that we need, of course, membership and membership fees to do what we do. So that is why we ask people to join, to make us, to help us to make a difference. But it's not true that we only help members, although there's certain things that's only for members. For instance, legal representation at Solidarity, if it comes to labor law and legal representation, it's for free for Solidarity members up to the Constitutional Court. There we don't do legal representation for all, because that of course will make commercially no sense. So there we only help members if it comes to legal cases, etc., because that's a member benefit.
Right. Okay, John Jefferson has asked, where does Solidarity stand on nation building? Do they want one nation and democracy?
We believe that a country like South Africa is stronger via communities. So we feel quite strong about that communities must organize themselves, must take self-responsibility, and we believe that the country is stronger through their communities. We don't think this country is stronger via just one strong nation-built theme. We think it makes a country weaker if you don't recognize communities and if you don't allow communities and even you must actually resource communities, but we don't see that in South Africa. But you must allow communities to be themselves. And that is actually what we do, and it is because we have cultural energy that we can do what we do at this stage. If we just say that, listen, we go up in a big South African nation, we will lose our cultural energy, and there will be no university, no technical colleges, no help of the poor, no safety structures, etc., because the community, you lose your sense of community. And the problem is that ideology of one big nation is actually a state ideology. That is ideologies that say that everything must be managed from a central level. The state must take responsibility, and we are all loyal subjects to the state. And we don't believe in that. We believe in communities that must take responsibility. And we think that's the power actually of a democracy. A democracy that is a lively combination of different communities are much more stronger than this one central nation-built kind of community.
Right. Now, I've got a couple of questions, and then I think we've pretty well got through them all. I thank you for your time, Dirk. I know you're a busy man, and a lot of interest in what you have to say, I can tell you that. Harm Timmerman says, do you work with Dirk of Philadelphia ARC?
Yes, I know Dirk, and the Solidarity Helping Hand as a relationship with Dirk. I visited Dirk more than once from Philadelphia ARC. He is actually amazing work what he does.
Oh, he's amazing, man.
What I like of the model is it's not only because I've visited different white informal settlements, and some of them is really only settlements where people live in poverty. But when Dirk in giving people dignity, because they can work there, they take self-responsibility. There's economic activity. So Philadelphia ARC and dignity, I have real respect for. Dirk do great work. I visited not long ago a group from South Tyrol did the program on Philadelphia ARC, and they did an amazing story on white poverty in South Africa, and then specifically with a focus on that specific project there. I think that is a kind of model that one can learn a lot from.
Yeah, I mean, he's doing fantastic work. Now, I just want to address the side chat and people watching the live stream. Please remember, guys, put your questions in. We're going to be closing off the live stream shortly. We've been going for nearly 2.5 hours, and I've learnt a heck of a lot. And I thank Dirk so much for his time. Now, Kurt has asked, I'm a member. Please ask Dirk, will Solidarity help or implement a program to help people to get out of South Africa, similar to bursaries that you have to pay back, maybe?
We don't have a program at this stage to help people to get out of South Africa. I don't think that's our goal at this stage. Although we, like I said, we don't see people as traitors that leave South Africa, but that's not our core function. Our core function is to help people to create a future here in South Africa, because the fact of the matter is that 85% of Afrikaners can't leave South Africa.
Yeah.
And most of them don't want to leave South Africa, but they simply can't. They don't have the resources to leave. So our resources and our focus is there to help them and to support them. If you immigration is always only an answer for individuals, not an answer for a community. And if you leave, I understand you leave as an individual, but if you stay, you can't survive as an individual. If you stay, you can only survive within the reality of the community. And we see that as our responsibility. So we don't have at this stage programs or structures to support people to leave South Africa.
Right. Now, Jack Standers asked, please ask Dirk what he thinks of secession, and if he has any alternative ideas, if he is not 100% in favor of it.
Yes, that we got a similar question earlier, And what we go from the point of departure is that we must at first establish de facto realities. We must put things on the ground. And within de facto realities, that's things on the ground, you get actually a lot of freedom. And because the fact is that you put a Soltex, for example, you put a Soltex on the ground de facto, and then de jure, you are free from affirmative action because you train your people in scarce and critical skills. So that is a form of course, of self-determination. Self-determination is something that is on a continuum. The beginning of the continuum is here in Waverley, where I live. We patrol the streets, and we take we have self-determination in our streets. And then we have a bit more self-determination in the movement. We have more self-determination in academia, etc. And on the other continuum, you have an Urania that has de facto self-determination. They have they can make their own decisions, etc. They are much further down the road of secession than I still must patrol my own street here in Waverley. So there's a continuum, and that we must see. And Solidarity work on the whole of that continuum, but we work from the premises that de facto realities is quite important. And you must have de facto realities if you want to have de jure recognition. It's much too easy if you think that, listen, what I must fight for is de jure recognition, but I don't have any de facto reality to be recognized.
Right. Now, thanks, Erica. That's great. Erica, did you hear earlier that Dirk invited Patrick to contact him direct? And I can certainly give you Dirk's email address later on. Okay, now let's just get back to these questions. I've got 2 more here to go. I'm going to cut off the questions very shortly, guys. We've been going for nearly 2.5 hours, and I'm sure Dirk has got a lot of work still to get into it back at home. Now,
Scott,
yeah.
When I said to my wife that your program runs sometimes longer than an hour, she said to me, but Dirk, you are from the Free State. I don't think you have more than half an hour English.
Well, your English is fantastic. I've got to tell you, I would never have known that Afrikaans is your home language. I mean, your English is great. Now, John Jefferson has asked, what about the ANC's 25-year-long mistakes? Will they ever learn?
The problem is that the ANC works from an ideological base, and ideologies does not take realities into account, and that is why it's so difficult to understand. At the moment that you recognize that, then you understand they will make the same mistakes because they fall back on their ideological logic, and that is why they make mistakes with Eskom, and that is why they will also make similar kind of mistake in the dealing with this whole COVID-19 crisis. We will see more centralization because that's their ideology. So yes, so the problem is 25 years of mistakes because they work from a failed ideological premises.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually call it the L factor on this channel, the logic factor.
The logic.
Now, Jarko Barnard's asked a couple of questions, which I'll put together because they're in the same theme. He says, just a question to Herman. Are these towns you're talking about the estates meant for just the wealthy? Solidarity have no plan. We should pay tax plus pay for security, medical aid, etc., which is the rich can afford. So I think what he's saying is, does Solidarity cater for the poorer people in the community?
I think the majority of our work is actually among the poorer people in the community. The helping hand, of course, is just among the poor in the community. And then Solidarities, a lot of Solidarities work as well. We work with the working class, etc. But I understand 100%. What he's saying there is double taxation. And what he's saying is that the state is supposed to deliver security services, but now I must try to afford. I must have private security as well, and everyone can't do that. And so the problem with double taxation with this community-based approach is a real problem, and you must overcome that. And that is not that simple. So what we do is, for example, we have the university. The university is double taxation because there's public universities where you can go to. Now you must go to a private university, although we try our fees quite in line with the public environment. But we make sure it's a world-class university. But what we do then is to make sure that we have study aid for people that can't afford. So just this year, we paid out 40 million rand for people that can't afford tertiary studies. And so what we say is we offer the best that we can offer, and then we see how can we make it accessible for people that can't afford it as well. So yes, I understand the problem of double taxation, but we don't have a choice. In South Africa, you can't say, well, because I don't want to take the responsibility from the community, because it's actually the state's responsibility. Then you're going to wait for the state. You're going to wait a long, long time. And we decided deliberately we're not going to wait for the state. We're not going to be responsible, and we're not going to be dependent on the state. And we take self-responsibility. But the result of that is double taxation and community-based taxation. It sounds like a hard word, but the community-based taxation can be in other forms. Like, for instance, our short-term insurance strategy. We have Verseker, that is a short-term insurance company, and we mobilize on an annual basis millions of rand through short-term insurance, and that goes 100% back, subsidizing this. So short-term insurance is our community tax that would have gone to other places and in pockets of other companies, and now we use that to push that back through the community so that we can build a university, a technical college, we can establish study aid, etc. Via the community, because we have another ways of mobilizing community capital, because we don't have taxation to do a lot of these things.
Right. Now, Gordon Blues has said, I would like to say to Dirk, I loved his letter to Julius Malema. It was brilliantly put, and I couldn't agree more. And he says, I doff my hat.
Thank you very much. I reliable learn that Julius Malema did not feel the same than you.
Now, Henk Weiser has said the biggest question, what do we do if they suddenly start attacking us?
Yes. I think what's important is that we must make sure that we have safety structures in place. At this stage, we don't pick that up. We have real good information, intelligence on this. We have a team that just work on the intelligence to make sure that we have early warning signs if there's any kind of social disruption that will affect us, especially in the COVID-19 times. I get every day, we get intelligence reports from people to say that that's the kind of countries at this stage, that's the risk, etc. But we must organize ourselves. At this stage, we've established more than 160 community safety structures, and we train them. We must protect ourselves. We must say that we must not, again, be only dependent on the state to protect us. We as community must protect ourselves in a responsible way. And that we do. So we put a lot of structures in place. So in the first place, we must concentrate. In the second place, we must put safety structures in place. And then we must have intelligence to make sure that we don't, we are not caught off guard. So, but at this stage, we don't pick up that risk that big, although we are quite aware of that.
Right. Now, just related to that, I've heard reports that these groups that go and loot shops and go act like a group are actually members of a local WhatsApp group. So what happens is someone sends out a WhatsApp and says, let's go and loot the local liquor store, and that's why you suddenly have 100, 200 people arriving at the same time. Are you aware of that?
I'm not specifically aware about that. Of course, social media is nowadays a mobilizing instrument, so that technically that's definitely possible. I'm not specifically aware of that at this time.
Right. Okay, guys, look, I think we've gone through all the questions. I just want to thank once again all our moderators. You've done a fantastic job as usual. And our head moderator, Jarko, who always does an amazing job. To all those who are watching, thank you for being part of the live stream tonight. And for the people who watch it later, thank you for sitting through this whole live stream. I found it absolutely fascinating and very, very informative. And people in the live stream are concurring with what I'm saying. Marie says, for example, Scott, tell Dirk a big thank you. Fantastic information. Now, I just want to say to you, Dirk, thank you so much for coming onto the live stream with us. I'd love to have you back again in the future. And
You're more than welcome.
Oh, that'd be great, because I think that what this channel is doing is it is gaining. We've got about 90,000 subscribers between the two key Loving Life channels. So that's getting a huge message out there to not just people in South Africa, but across the world. About 70% of our subscribers live in South Africa. So 30%, which is about over 20,000 subscribers, live all over the world. And, you know, they're watching these live streams and they're watching the videos that I put up, which obviously have a message of getting the truth out about what's going on in South Africa. Now, is there something you'd like to say to people watching now and people who might watch the video later? Just a message from Solidarity.
No, Scott, I just want to say two things. In the first place, I want to encourage people to get involved in local structures, get involved in community structures. The future in South Africa lies in strong community structures, and it's our responsibility as members of the community to make our structure stronger. It can be the church structure, it can be the local patrol, it can be the school structure, whatever. It can be the Solidarity structure, the AfriForum structure, the Solidarity Helping Hand structure, whatever structure. And there's other community organizations, you mentioned that, help them, help the back the world, etc. And so let's make our community strong. Our future is the power of the community. That is the first place. In the second place, Scott, I want to say thank you very much for you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for this kind of fora that is created all over the world at this stage. There's alternative media that and voices are heard that's never been heard in the past. So thank you very much for creating alternative media. And I think we call it now alternative media, but more and more people make use of alternative media, and we're going to see that is going to be the mainstream media. So alternative can be mainstream. So thank you very much, Scott. And then I just want to apologize for the fact that the video did not work for some reason. I tried no more and put it off and try again and etc. We tested it earlier today and it worked then. Yeah, but what I can promise everyone is you did not miss much.
Well, the main thing is you got your message out there, and that is really what it's all about. But that's not a problem, Dirk. It's just been fantastic sharing this time with you. Now, you talked about the Solidarity organization. What is the best way for people to get in touch with Solidarity? Is it through your website, or is there like you've talked about the communities? Is there like a particular website that covers Solidarity's different communities and organizations?
Yeah, we have a Solidarity movement website that you can visit. That's more comprehensive website. Then we have one for Solidarity that's also quite comprehensive. And then you can, of course, AfriForum or Solidarity Helping Hand. I think that's
Right.
the four most important websites. So there's the movements one, then Solidarity Helping Hand, and AfriForum, and then, of course, all the others has their own academia, etc.
Right.
So that's yeah.
So what all they have to do is Google those different keywords and they'll find them.
Of course.
Okay, fantastic. All right, guys. Look.
Of course, everyone is on Facebook as well. I'm on Twitter as well. So,
What would they search on in Facebook? Just Solidarity?
Solidarity. That's
Okay.
the easiest.
Okay,
Yes.
fantastic. All right, guys, I just want to say thank you for being part of the live stream tonight. We had up to about 400 people at one time, and then on came Ramaphosa, and the viewership dropped down a little bit. But as soon as Ramaphosa had stopped talking, it went straight back up again. So obviously this is a topic that people are very interested in. And
Thank you.
as I said, Dirk, earlier, thank you so much. I'm going to shut down the live stream now, and I just want to say to everybody out there, please take care. Look after yourselves, and if you're in South Africa, please be very, very careful. Ciao for now.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Cheers, Dirk.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.